In the vast lands of ancient Greece, where mountains pierced the sky and rivers carved valleys through the earth, journeys were perilous, paths were uncertain, and the unknown awaited around every bend. Travelers set forth with hope and courage, yet few could anticipate the challenges that lay ahead. It was a world alive with gods and spirits, some benevolent, some mischievous, and others indifferent to the fate of mortals. In this intricate tapestry of life, one god moved faster than the winds, wiser than the cleverest mortal, and ever watchful of those who dared to journey far from home. This god was Hermes, the swift messenger of Olympus, the cunning guide, the protector of travelers, merchants, wanderers, and all who dare to tread the uncertain paths of the world. Hermes was no ordinary deity. He was born in a hidden cave on the slopes of Mount Cyllene, his cries echoing through the rocks, a sign of both his vitality and his extraordinary nature. From the very first moments of life, he displayed brilliance, cleverness, and an insatiable curiosity. The story of his birth spread quietly at first, whispered by nymphs who tended the mountainside streams. Yet those who heard it knew that Hermes was destined for greatness. By the time the sun had set on his first day, the newborn god had already begun acts of cunning that would echo through myth for centuries to come. Hermes' early exploits were legendary. Before he had even tasted the sweetness of milk or the warmth of the sun upon his skin, he ventured out, guided by a spark of ingenuity and mischief. In a daring and audacious act, he stole the sacred cattle of Apollo, the god of music and light. But it was not theft for mere pleasure. It was a demonstration of skill, wit, and the cleverness that would define him throughout eternity. He led the cattle along secret paths, leaving no trace for the vigilant god to follow. When confronted, Hermes did not defy Apollo with force. He charmed him with reason, explanation, and the subtle appeal of wit. From this first encounter, a pattern emerged. Hermes' power was not raw or destructive, but intelligent, subtle, and endlessly adaptable. Even then, Hermes showed a natural affinity for invention and creativity. He crafted the lyre from the shell of a tortoise, strings stretched and tuned with ingenuity beyond mortal comprehension. Music, harmony, and intellect became part of his nature, an extension of the swiftness of his mind as well as the nimbleness of his feet. He was a god who embodied movement, not only of the body, but of ideas, messages, and understanding. Wherever he walked, knowledge followed. Wherever he ran, insight traveled faster than the fleetest winds. But Hermes' gifts were not merely for show. From his earliest days, he became the protector of travelers, those who left home to seek fortune, wisdom, or adventure. He understood the hardships of journeys, the dangers of unfamiliar paths, and the vulnerabilities of those who dared to walk alone. Mountains, forests, rivers, and seas were filled with unseen peril. Steep cliffs, treacherous rocks, wild beasts, and the occasional trickery of spirits who delighted in confusing mortals. Hermes, swift and cunning, vowed to guide them, to watch over them, and to teach them the lessons that travel imparts. Courage tempered by caution, wisdom balanced with resourcefulness, and speed accompanied by careful observation. The god was not limited to mortal paths. He moved between Olympus and the world of men with a grace unmatched by any other deity. Winged sandals carried him faster than the winds. His staff, the caduceus, imbued with power to influence hearts, minds, and even the course of events. He could bring messages from the gods, intervene in subtle ways to prevent disaster, or simply watch, ensuring that lessons were learned without unnecessary suffering. To those he aided, Hermes was a silent companion, unseen yet ever present. To those who underestimated the journey, he was a clever challenge, an unseen force that tested their resolve. In the early dawn, when mist clung to valleys and mountains rose like shadows in the half-light, Hermes would traverse paths that mortals had yet to discover. He observed travelers setting out with trembling courage, merchants carrying fragile goods over uneven terrain, wanderers seeking wisdom beyond the familiar horizon. With every footstep, he whispered guidance through the rustle of leaves, the flight of birds, the subtle shifts of wind along the paths. Some would feel the nudge of intuition, a sudden idea, a fleeting clarity at the moment they needed it most, Hermes' invisible hand shaping the journey without revealing his presence. And yet, the god was not without playfulness. Mischief and humor flowed naturally through him, reminding mortals that travel is as much about experience and perspective as it is about reaching a destination. He would lead the unwary astray, only to reveal the correct path moments later, teaching lessons in patience, attentiveness, and adaptability. He understood that the road is a teacher as much as the destination, and that mistakes, when guided by subtle wisdom, can become the most powerful lessons of all. Hermes' role extended beyond mere guidance. He served as a messenger between gods, conveying instructions, resolving disputes, and carrying tidings that shaped the fates of mortals and immortals alike. He moved invisibly, yet every action had consequence. Mortals might never see him, but they would feel the results of his intervention, a safe passage, a timely warning, a clever solution to a seemingly impossible problem. His influence was both immediate and enduring, teaching that speed and cleverness, when combined with wisdom, can preserve life and shape destiny. The world of ancient Greece was vast, filled with paths unknown and challenges uncounted, yet Hermes traversed it all with grace, cunning, and insight. He was both companion and teacher, a god whose lessons were embedded in every step of the traveler's journey. Mountains became classrooms, rivers became teachers, and even the wind seemed imbued with guidance for those willing to perceive it. To follow the path Hermes illuminated was to learn the virtues of courage, prudence, cleverness, and respect for the forces that govern both mortal and divine realms. Thus begins the tale of Hermes, the guide of travelers. Through forests, mountains, rivers, and bustling cities, through encounters with mortals, spirits, and gods, his story unfolds. A long, immersive journey of wisdom, speed, cunning, and divine guidance. Every step taken, every challenge faced, and every lesson learned is a reflection of Hermes' enduring purpose, to shepherd travelers safely, to teach them through experience, and to ensure that courage, cleverness, and insight light the way on every path. High upon the slopes of Mount Cyllene, where the wind sang through the olive trees and the sun warmed the crags in gold, a cave lay hidden from mortal eyes. It was within this secluded sanctuary that the god Hermes first drew breath, a child born to Maia, daughter of Atlas, and the mighty Zeus, king of Olympus. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath, sensing that this birth would herald the arrival of a god unlike any other, swift, clever, mischievous, and wise beyond the understanding of mortals. From the very first cries of the newborn, the world seemed to notice. Birds paused in mid-flight, the waters of nearby springs shimmered unusually, and the wind seemed to bend toward the cave as if to offer their greetings. Hermes, even in infancy, exhibited qualities that would define him for eternity: an insatiable curiosity, a spark of intelligence, and a cunning glint in his eyes. The other gods looked on with intrigue. Some whispered in admiration, others in concern, for this child's cleverness promised both wonder and mischief. Within hours of his birth, Hermes demonstrated abilities that astonished all who observed. Though wrapped in swaddling cloth, he wriggled free with the agility of a serpent, his small hands and feet already nimble. He crawled across the cave floor with uncanny speed, exploring every crevice, every shadow, and every echoing corner. Maya, though cautious, watched with a mixture of awe and anxiety, realizing that her son's destiny would not be ordinary, and that the lessons of life for this child would be extraordinary. By the very next day, Hermes had undertaken an act that would mark the beginning of his legendary reputation. With a cleverness far beyond his months, he ventured out of the cave and into the world beyond. His small form moved silently across hills and valleys, unnoticed by shepherds and animals alike. Guided by instinct, intelligence, and an unshakable curiosity, he came upon the sacred cattle of Apollo, grazing in fields that shimmered with morning dew. Without hesitation or fear, Hermes orchestrated a plan that was both daring and brilliant. He stole the cattle, guiding them along secret trails, leaving no footprints that would reveal his path. But Hermes' theft was not mere mischief. It was a demonstration of cunning, ingenuity, and foresight. He covered his tracks by cleverly reversing the hooves of the cattle, leading anyone who followed in circles. He devised a system to move the cattle quietly, avoiding detection, and even sang softly to them, calming their movements with an innate sense of rhythm and persuasion. By the time the sun reached its peak, Hermes had not only completed the theft, but done so with finesse, intelligence, and absolute subtlety. When Apollo discovered the disappearance of his sacred cattle, he was furious. He searched tirelessly, tracing tracks and calling upon the winds and rivers for assistance. Yet he found no sign of the clever child. It was not anger alone that drove Apollo, but also admiration tinged with bewilderment. When Hermes was finally brought before him, barely more than a day old, the infant spoke with such wit, charm, and reasoning that Apollo could not remain angry. The infant Hermes explained his actions, demonstrating both intelligence and a subtle understanding of negotiation and diplomacy. Even in these earliest hours, Hermes exemplified the qualities that would define his role as messenger, guide, and protector: cleverness, charm, and an ability to influence the hearts and minds of gods and mortals alike. This early episode set the tone for Hermes' existence. He became known as the god who could move between realms, traverse mountains, seas, and cities with unmatched swiftness, and influence events through ingenuity rather than force. His winged sandals, later a symbol of his divine speed, were first glimpsed as the subtle movements that allowed him to escape detection, to traverse the earth without hindrance, and to appear where he was most needed. His caduceus, the staff entwined with serpents, would later become both a tool and a symbol of his ability to mediate, negotiate, and guide. Even in infancy, the seeds of his divine gifts and responsibilities were already taking root. Hermes' early days were also filled with lessons in observation and learning. He watched mortals as they traveled along paths, noting their struggles, their fears, and their cleverness. He observed merchants balancing fragile goods on long journeys, shepherds guiding flocks across rocky hills, and travelers navigating rivers and forests with care and caution. Even then, he understood the trials that awaited those who move through the world, the dangers both natural and divine, and the subtle ways guidance could alter the course of a life. By the end of his first week, Hermes had already begun to understand his role as a bridge between worlds. He could move unseen among mortals, guiding, observing, and teaching without revealing himself. He could converse with the creatures of the forests and fields, learning from their instincts, speed, and awareness. Even the winds seemed to answer to him, shifting subtly to aid his movements or warn of approaching danger. Hermes was, from the very beginning, a god of movement, knowledge, cunning, and protection, a being whose influence would ripple through both mortal and divine realms. The birth of Hermes marked the beginning of an era in which travel, commerce, and exploration would gain a divine ally. Mortals would eventually come to know him as a protector of journeys, a messenger who could guide through uncertainty, and a god whose presence was felt in the smallest instinct and the largest adventure. Travelers would whisper his name in gratitude. Merchants would honor him in offerings, and poets would recount his deeds with awe and admiration. All of this stemmed from the cleverness, insight, and divine swiftness that defined him even as a newborn. Thus, the god who would become the eternal guide of travelers, the cunning messenger of Olympus, and the ever-watchful protector of those on journeys was born. Hermes, from his first breath, demonstrated that wisdom, cunning, and agility are as vital to survival and success as strength or valor. His life, from that moment onward, would be a testament to the power of intellect, observation, and the subtle guidance that shapes destinies. As Hermes grew in swiftness and cunning, his role as guide and protector of travelers became ever more apparent. He traversed mountains, valleys, forests, and rivers, moving unseen yet attentive to every mortal who ventured into the unknown. For those who journeyed with courage but lacked experience, he offered subtle guidance. For those driven by pride, greed, or ignorance, he orchestrated lessons that could be as gentle as a whisper or as intricate as a puzzle. Hermes' interactions with mortals were always measured, never intrusive unless necessity demanded. A young merchant crossing a winding mountain pass might suddenly feel a breeze shift just so, diverting his attention from a loose stone that would have sent him tumbling. A weary traveler, lost in a dense forest, could glimpse a shadow dart between trees, a fleeting guide, just enough to illuminate the correct path. In every instance, Hermes ensured that mortals learned not only to reach their destinations, but to observe, reflect, and adapt, for these were lessons that would last beyond a single journey. One such mortal was Callias, a young shepherd seeking to transport his father's flock to a distant village. The path was perilous, winding through forests thick with underbrush and hills alive with hidden dangers. As he climbed the slopes, he felt the faintest tug of wind against his sleeve, leading him away from a patch of jagged rocks that would have shattered his footing. Birds overhead seemed to circle in patterns that hinted at safe passage. Hermes, unseen, guided Callias not with force but with subtle signals, teaching him to trust intuition, to read nature, and to navigate uncertainty with patience and attention. In another instance, a young woman named Lysandra attempted to traverse a river swollen with spring rains. She was determined, yet her lack of experience made the crossing dangerous. As she approached, Hermes sent a school of fish swimming near the safest path, their movements a silent cue. A fallen branch floated just so, providing a makeshift bridge where the currents were strongest. Through these quiet interventions, Lysandra learned to observe, plan, and adjust her actions according to the signals around her. When she finally stepped onto solid ground, she carried with her the understanding that success depends not on brute force or haste, but on careful attention and respect for the world's rhythms. Yet Hermes' guidance was not always so gentle. Some mortals, driven by arrogance or greed, sought to manipulate or dominate their environment, believing themselves superior to the forces they encountered. These travelers faced challenges carefully orchestrated by Hermes to teach humility and insight. A merchant, attempting to shortcut a journey by ignoring ancient warnings of shifting sands, found his caravan delayed by mysterious currents and obstacles. Only by observing, listening, and adjusting did he make safe passage. The lesson was clear. Those who fail to heed guidance, whether divine or natural, risk failure. Those who embrace wisdom, however subtle, thrive. Hermes also guided mortals through encounters with creatures and spirits, both wondrous and dangerous. Forests contained sly nymphs and trickster spirits. Rivers and lakes harbored water deities who demanded respect and cleverness. Mountains were home to creatures that tested strength and patience alike. Travelers who approached with fear or rashness were challenged repeatedly, learning the value of courage tempered by prudence. Those who acted with humility and observation were led to safety, often gaining insight into themselves and the world they traversed. Through these encounters, Hermes imparted lessons that extended beyond mere survival. He taught adaptability, the ability to respond swiftly and intelligently to unforeseen circumstances. He taught humility, the understanding that mortals, while capable, are subject to forces larger than themselves. He taught insight, the recognition of patterns, the value of reflection, and the wisdom of observation. Every journey became an education, every obstacle a teacher, every encounter a mirror for the traveler's character. Some mortals, unaware of Hermes' guiding hand, attributed their success to luck, courage, or fate. Yet the god's influence was always present, subtle, but unmistakable to those willing to perceive it. Travelers began to speak in whispers of a mysterious force that helped the lost, guided the clever, and challenged the proud. Merchants offered thanks in small tokens, travelers left gifts at shrines along paths, and poets wove tales of a swift, unseen protector whose presence brought fortune and wisdom alike. Hermes' guidance also extended to complex moral lessons. A traveler tempted to cheat, steal, or deceive along his path might suddenly encounter obstacles that thwarted selfish plans, teaching integrity through experience rather than punishment. A young warrior, eager to rush in a conflict, might find paths blocked or diverted, learning patience, observation, and strategic thinking. Through such lessons, Hermes cultivated not only safety in travel, but growth of character, ensuring that mortals carried wisdom from their journeys into their communities. Even communities as a whole felt his subtle influence. Villagers whose paths crossed frequently found themselves aided by unseen forces in trade, agriculture, and travel. Merchants arrived with their goods intact. Messages reached distant villages on time, and travelers returned with stories that strengthened social bonds and collective knowledge. Hermes' guidance was woven into the fabric of mortal life, shaping the way societies navigated both physical and moral landscapes. At times, Hermes chose to reveal himself, usually when a mortal demonstrated exceptional insight, courage, or cleverness. His presence was swift, a flash of winged sandals upon the earth, a gleam of cunning in his eyes. He offered words of advice, a subtle gesture, or the gift of clever tools or strategies. These rare encounters left mortals in awe, inspired by the god's wisdom and grateful for the guidance that had protected and instructed them. Yet more often, his influence remained unseen, felt only in intuition, sudden clarity, or the fortunate alignment of events, a whisper of divine presence on the path. Through all these interactions, Hermes refined his own understanding of mortals, their potential, and the nature of journeys. He observed how fear and courage, pride and humility, cleverness and foolishness interplayed to shape the course of events. He learned to tailor his guidance, sometimes subtle, sometimes direct, always in service of growth, safety, and wisdom. His role was not merely that of protector, but of teacher, mentor, and guide, an ever-present force shaping lives and destinies with both discretion and care. Thus, the stage was set for Hermes' lifelong purpose, to move among mortals and gods alike, guiding travelers across treacherous paths, teaching lessons both subtle and profound, and ensuring that courage, cleverness, and wisdom walked hand in hand. His presence would ripple through time, shaping the journeys of countless souls and leaving behind a legacy of guidance, insight, and the enduring art of safe passage through the world's many trials. Even the cleverest mortals, when faced with the unknown, are tested in ways that reveal the depths of their courage, wisdom, and adaptability. Hermes, ever watchful and swift, orchestrated these trials not to punish, but to teach, to mold travelers into individuals capable of navigating both the physical world and the moral complexities of life. In this part of his journey, Hermes' subtle interventions became lessons etched in experience, weaving intelligence, bravery, and prudence into the fabric of mortal existence. Among the travelers who ventured into his domain was Theon, a young scribe eager to journey from his village to a distant city to deliver sacred scrolls. The path lay through dense forests, jagged hills, and treacherous rivers. On the first day, Theon was confident and self-assured, thinking his knowledge of maps and celestial navigation sufficient to carry him safely. Yet, as dusk fell, the forest seemed to thicken unnaturally, shadows twisting, paths dividing into countless confusing trails. Hermes observed silently from above, his winged sandals barely stirring the air, and allowed the scribe to encounter the first challenge: the necessity of trust in more than just intellect, the realization that the world is alive and full of forces beyond calculation. A sudden rustling drew Theon's attention, and a sly nymph appeared, veiled in mist and shadow, testing his patience and moral resolve. The nymph offered shortcuts and temptations, a path that promised speed but led into danger, or the opportunity to take a rare artifact from a protected grove. Theon, guided by an intuition he could not yet name, hesitated, considered, and chose carefully. Hermes, unseen, smiled at the choice, for the scribe had begun to learn the first lesson. Wisdom lies in restraint and observation, not in impulse or desire. Further along, Theon faced a river swollen with spring rains. Its waters surged with hidden currents and jagged rocks beneath the surface. Here Hermes' influence was felt more subtly. A school of fish moved in patterns that hinted at the safest passage. A fallen branch floated just so, forming a temporary bridge over the most dangerous point. Theon followed these signs, guided by observation rather than force, and crossed safely. By the time he reached the opposite bank, he had learned that courage, coupled with careful attention, ensured survival and progress. Not all trials were as gentle. Some travelers faced dangers that could have ended their journeys, had it not been for Hermes' cunning and intervention. A merchant caravan, hurrying along a mountain pass, encountered a sudden landslide. Rocks tumbled down with fury, threatening destruction. Hermes, unseen, directed the wind to shift subtly, creating a gap in the falling stones. Those who remained alert noticed and adjusted their movements, while those who panicked learned the importance of calm and observation. Every risk was a lesson in adaptability, demonstrating that foresight and presence of mind are as critical as physical strength. Hermes' challenges also tested moral character. Travelers tempted to deceive, cheat, or exploit were faced with situations that exposed their intentions. One young shepherd, seeking to shortcut a journey by misleading others, suddenly found himself lost in an intricate maze of paths, where only honesty and careful listening could reveal the correct way forward. Through this subtle guidance, Hermes instilled a principle fundamental to all travelers. Integrity is essential, for deception leads not to success, but to confusion and delay. Even seasoned adventurers were not immune. A group of warriors, proud of their skills and quick to act without thought, attempted to cross a dense forest rumored to house spirits of cunning. The spirits conjured illusions, shifting landscapes, and sudden obstacles that confounded the warriors. Hermes moved among them silently, guiding only those who observed carefully, who considered and adjusted before acting. Those who rushed or ignored subtle cues stumbled, while those who embraced humility and insight found safe passage. The trials demonstrated a vital truth. Strength alone cannot overcome the unpredictable challenges of life. Cleverness, patience, and discernment are equally essential. Hermes' lessons were not limited to individual travelers. Entire communities, connected by shared roads, rivers, and passes, were influenced by his guidance. Caravans that collaborated, villages that planned together, and merchants who respected natural laws all prospered, sometimes without realizing why. Hermes ensured that patterns of cooperation, observation, and mutual respect emerged naturally. In subtle ways, he shaped society, embedding wisdom into travel, trade, and human interaction. At times, Hermes allowed obstacles to remain for extended periods, giving mortals the opportunity to reflect, experiment, and adapt. A young traveler might find herself blocked by an impassable gorge, forced to reconsider her strategy. An impassable river could inspire creative solutions, teaching ingenuity and patience. By allowing challenges to persist, Hermes encouraged mortals to develop skills, resilience, and judgment, fostering growth that could not occur through effortless success. Hermes' trials were often accompanied by lessons in empathy and compassion. Travelers who acted selfishly or carelessly faced greater difficulty, while those who considered the welfare of companions, animals, or the natural world were subtly aided. A merchant who shared water with a thirsty stranger received guidance in the form of clear paths and safe crossings. A shepherd who tended not only his flock but those of others discovered hidden routes that bypassed treacherous terrain. In all cases, Hermes taught that cooperation, foresight, and kindness are as vital as courage and cleverness. Yet the god's interventions were never heavy-handed. He did not save mortals from all danger, nor did he prevent mistakes entirely. Instead, his presence was like a whisper carried on the wind, a fleeting shadow, a hint in the rustle of leaves, or a sudden flash of clarity. Mortals learned to observe, interpret, and act with prudence. These experiences shaped not only their journeys but their character, teaching lessons that extended far beyond any single trial. By the end of these trials, mortals carried Hermes' lessons into their communities, weaving wisdom into the fabric of daily life. Travelers spoke of uncanny guidance, merchants honored the god with offerings, and poets immortalized his deeds in verse. Through challenge and observation, courage and cleverness, mortals learned the enduring truths Hermes embodied. Insight must accompany action, prudence must temper ambition, and the journey itself is as important as the destination. In this way, Hermes transformed the act of travel into a crucible for growth. Mountains, rivers, forests, and roads became living classrooms. Obstacles became teachers. Success and failure alike imparted lessons. The god, moving unseen among mortals, guided them through trials that were as practical as they were moral, shaping not only their journeys, but the wisdom and character they carried forward. As travelers endured trials and faced the uncertainties of the world, Hermes' role as protector and teacher reached its most profound expression. Not only did he guide mortals along treacherous paths and orchestrate challenges to teach courage, cleverness, and humility, but he also bestowed gifts, subtle and profound, that would accompany them long after their journeys had ended. These gifts were both practical and spiritual, tangible tools and invisible wisdom woven into the fabric of their being, ensuring that the lessons of travel endured far beyond any single path. One of the first gifts Hermes offered was protection in movement. To the weary traveler navigating perilous terrain, He would subtly influence the winds to shift in favor of safe passage or cause leaves, stones, and natural markers to indicate the correct route. A merchant crossing a narrow mountain path might feel a sudden sense of balance, a step landing perfectly on a hidden ledge, or sense the stability of the ground beneath him even where it seemed treacherous. This gift was never a guarantee of safety through force, but rather a divine attunement to the environment, allowing mortals to act with confidence, perception, and skill. Another gift was clarity of thought and insight. Travelers often faced moments of indecision, when paths split into countless directions or dangers lay hidden. Hermes would bestow sudden intuition, the kind that arrives like a whisper in the mind or a flicker of vision in the corner of the eye. This was no mere luck. It was a divine encouragement to trust reasoning, observation, and inner wisdom. Those who accepted it learned to anticipate challenges, make careful choices, and navigate uncertainty with both prudence and courage. Hermes also granted agility and swiftness, not as mere physical speed, but as a harmony of mind and body. The messenger god could not carry mortals on his wings, but he could inspire them to move with grace, balance, and timing. A shepherd avoiding a sudden landslide, a merchant balancing goods over slick rocks, or a young wanderer sprinting to rescue a companion could all feel an almost imperceptible enhancement in their reflexes and intuition. It was the gift of attunement, being in harmony with the rhythm of the world, responding to its cues with precision and intelligence. Perhaps the most profound gifts were wisdom and cleverness, the traits that defined Hermes himself. Travelers who carried these gifts learned to see solutions where others saw only obstacles. They understood the value of patience and observation, the power of negotiation, and the subtle art of influence. One young warrior, facing a formidable chasm on a mountain path, discovered a hidden ledge and natural footholds that no map had revealed. A merchant navigating a treacherous river found currents and floating debris aligning in ways that allowed safe passage. These gifts were lessons in disguise, instilling in mortals the capacity to act with ingenuity, foresight, and adaptability in the face of both physical and moral challenges. Hermes' gifts were not given indiscriminately. He observed intentions, character, and potential, offering aid and insight where would nurture growth and responsibility. A traveler who acted selfishly or recklessly might encounter challenges designed to teach restraint, patience, or humility. Another, demonstrating curiosity, courage, and respect for the forces of the world, would receive guidance that enhanced perception, intuition, and cleverness. Hermes' intervention was always measured, precise, and aligned with the growth of character, not mere survival. To some, these gifts were tangible and enduring. Hermes provided tools crafted with divine wisdom. The caduceus, which could mediate conflict, heal, or illuminate hidden truths. Winged sandals, symbols of agility and speed that inspired those who wore them to move with purpose and precision. And pouches of provisions, which seemed to appear when needed and vanished once the traveler had learned to rely on skill and observation rather than dependence alone. Each gift was a reflection of Hermes' understanding of the world, that survival, wisdom, and success require a combination of observation, intelligence, courage, and respect for the natural and divine order. Hermes' gifts were also moral in nature. Travelers who exhibited kindness, cooperation, and empathy found themselves guided toward favorable outcomes. Those who considered the welfare of companions, animals, or fellow travelers were subtly aided, while those driven by arrogance or greed encountered lessons that tempered their impulses. Through these interactions, Hermes reinforced the principles of community, compassion, and integrity, showing that the path of the traveler is not only a journey through the physical world, but also through the landscape of character. Stories of these gifts spread quietly at first. Travelers who had experienced unusual guidance, who had survived impossible paths, or who had received insight at the critical moment began to speak in hushed tones of Hermes, the god who walked unseen among mortals, who shaped journeys with invisible hands, and who bestowed gifts that transformed both body and mind. Merchants, poets, and sages recorded these experiences, embedding Hermes' influence into culture, practice, and collective memory. Even when his presence remained invisible, his gifts continued to shape the decisions, courage, and cleverness of those who encountered them. Hermes' interventions often revealed the interconnectedness of all journeys. A path cleared for one traveler could provide insight or opportunity for another. A river crossed safely by one merchant could serve as a lesson in navigation for generations to come. Even the smallest act of guidance, an instinct nudged, a leaf shifted, a shadow revealed, could ripple through time, shaping communities, trade, exploration, and the moral compass of those who followed. Hermes' gifts were eternal not in the form of objects or magic alone, but in the enduring wisdom imparted to mortals and passed down through stories, teachings, and experience. Through these gifts, Hermes solidified his role as the eternal guide of travelers, not merely a protector from danger, nor simply a divine messenger. He became a teacher, mentor, and source of inspiration. His influence ensured that travelers developed not only the skills to navigate the world safely, but also the virtues required to do so wisely: courage, adaptability, observation, prudence, and empathy. Each gift, each lesson, was a thread woven into the lives of mortals, strengthening the fabric of civilization and the enduring culture of travel, exploration, and commerce. By the end of this phase of his guidance, Hermes' travelers emerged transformed. They carried more than provisions and memories. They bore gifts of insight, courage, and cleverness. They had learned to read the subtle cues of the world, to interpret signals from nature and circumstance, and to approach both challenges and opportunities with intelligence and grace. In this way, Hermes ensured that his presence endured, not merely through myth or memory, but through the actions, choices, and wisdom of the mortals he touched. Thus, Hermes' gifts became his lasting legacy, tools of protection, insight, and ingenuity, lessons of courage, observation, and prudence, and moral guidance that shaped both individual journeys and collective culture. Mortals who carried these gifts, consciously or unconsciously, spread Hermes' influence across lands, rivers, mountains, and seas, ensuring that the god's wisdom, cunning, and benevolence would endure for generations yet to come. Time, as it flows across mountains, rivers, and forests, is both a witness and a teacher. Generations of mortals have set out on paths, ventured into unknown lands, and braved challenges, carrying with them the lessons imparted by Hermes, the swift and cunning guide. Even when unseen, his influence shaped journeys, choices, and destinies. In this part of the story, we explore how Hermes' guidance became a legacy, woven into the culture, wisdom, and hearts of travelers across time. The god's legacy begins with the travelers themselves, those who learned to navigate the world with both courage and prudence. Each journey became a story passed from parent to child, master to apprentice, elder to youth. A shepherd recounting how his intuition, guided by an invisible force, led him safely across a jagged mountain path. A merchant telling of sudden insight that prevented disaster on a river crossing. A warrior remembering the subtle cues that allowed him to avoid a deadly ambush. All of these stories carried Hermes' influence forward. The lessons of observation, cleverness, patience, and humility became interwoven with the memory of each adventure. Communities, too, bore the mark of Hermes' guidance. Villages along trade routes flourished as travelers, informed by the lessons of the god, navigated roads more safely, traded goods with foresight, and cooperated in ways that ensured collective prosperity. Temples and shrines dedicated to Hermes appeared at crossroads, riverbanks, and mountain passes, not merely as places of worship, but as reminders that guidance, observation, and prudence were virtues worth honoring. Generations of travelers left offerings, shared stories, and taught the young to heed the subtle signs of the world, continuing the god's influence across time and space. Hermes' legacy was not static. It evolved with each traveler who encountered it. The cleverness he instilled adapted to the context of each journey. A merchant navigating bustling city markets learned negotiation and perception, while a wanderer exploring dense forests discovered patience, humility, and resourcefulness. Those who traveled alone felt the quiet guidance of the god as intuition and instinct, while those journeying in groups learned cooperation, empathy, and leadership. Through these diverse experiences, Hermes' lessons spread into every facet of mortal life, shaping both practical skills and moral wisdom. The messenger god's influence also extended beyond mortal experience into the divine interplay of Olympus. By guiding mortals wisely, he ensured the stability of trade, communication, and interaction among human communities, which in turn affected the balance of favor among the gods. A safe and prosperous journey could inspire devotion, offerings, and stories that reached the ears of deities across the pantheon. In this way, Hermes became a bridge not only between mortal destinations, but between mortal and divine realms, ensuring harmony, wisdom, and understanding flowed through the world. Even in the natural world, Hermes' legacy was visible. Rivers, mountains, forests, and crossroads bore the imprint of his lessons. Travelers learned to read the signs of changing winds, the subtle shift of shadows, or the behavior of animals along the path. Each detail, small or large, was a testament to Hermes' enduring influence, a reminder that the god's guidance extended beyond immediate survival to the cultivation of insight, attentiveness, and reverence for the living world. Those who observed and adapted carried forward the traditions of respect, cleverness, and prudence, echoing Hermes' lessons with every step. Hermes' teachings were often transmitted through stories, songs, and oral tradition. Minstrels sang of his cleverness, poets recounted his interventions, and elders passed tales of his guidance to the young. In these stories, the god's presence was eternal, immortalized not merely as a myth, but as a living guide whose influence could be felt by all who ventured into the unknown. The lessons of caution, cleverness, and observation became cultural touchstones, shaping not only individual journeys, but societal values and expectations of morality, courage, and wisdom. Yet the most enduring aspect of Hermes' legacy lies in the travelers themselves. Those who absorbed his lessons carried them forward in ways that transcended physical journeys. They became teachers, guides, and mentors, passing wisdom along to others. They observed, interpreted, and acted with ingenuity, understanding that the journey itself is a teacher and that every path, challenge, and obstacle holds insight if one is attentive. In doing so, Hermes' influence multiplied exponentially, touching countless lives across generations, mountains, rivers, and seas. Even in quiet moments, when a traveler pauses by a river, watches the flight of birds overhead, or listens to the rustle of leaves in the wind, Hermes' presence can be felt. The god's legacy is subtle yet powerful, a reminder that guidance is often invisible, felt in intuition, insight, and the gentle alignment of events. Travelers learn to trust these whispers of wisdom, navigating not only physical landscapes, but the complex terrain of morality, choice, and consequence. Hermes' legacy, therefore, is eternal. It is woven into the culture of travel, the wisdom of observation, the courage to face uncertainty, and the cleverness to navigate challenges with intelligence and grace. It endures in every traveler who moves with attentiveness, in every merchant who conducts trade with prudence, and in every wanderer who seeks adventure with humility. Through them, the god of speed, cunning, and guidance continues to shape the world, unseen yet profoundly influential. As the sun sets over mountains, rivers, and forests, and travelers rest in inns or beneath the open sky, Hermes watches silently. His winged sandals leave no trace. His caduceus gleams in hidden light, and his wisdom flows like the wind along the paths of the world. The god who began life in a quiet cave on Mount Cyllene, who stole Apollo's cattle and charmed the gods with wit, who guided mortals through trials, bestowed gifts, and taught subtle lessons, remains ever vigilant. His legacy is a living force, ensuring that courage, cleverness, prudence, and empathy endure along every journey, across every path, and through every generation. Thus concludes the story of Hermes, the guide of travelers, a tale of speed, wit, wisdom, and divine guidance, whose lessons echo across time and whose influence continues to shape the journeys of mortals and gods alike. As night falls over the hills, rivers, and forests of ancient Greece, the paths that mortals have traveled grow quiet, yet the legacy of Hermes, the swift and cunning guide, lingers in every corner of the world. Though unseen, his presence whispers through the rustling leaves, the flight of birds, the glint of moonlight on river stones, and the gentle push of a breeze that steers travelers toward safety. The god who walked the world with winged sandals, who carried messages between gods and mortals, and who guided countless journeys across mountains, seas, and forests, continues to teach, protect, and inspire, even in the silence of the night. Hermes' story, from his miraculous birth in the hidden cave of Mount Cyllene to his clever theft of Apollo's sacred cattle, his invention of the lyre, and his endless guidance of mortals, illustrates a truth that transcends time, that courage, cleverness, observation, and wisdom are gifts that endure beyond any single journey. Every traveler who walks a path, crosses a river, navigates a forest, or climbs a mountain carries the potential to encounter Hermes, not as a visible deity, but as intuition, insight, and the subtle alignment of circumstances that guide one safely forward. Through the ages, Hermes' influence has shaped not only individual journeys, but entire communities and societies. Merchants traveling safely along trade routes, shepherds guiding flocks across hills, messengers delivering news to distant villages, and wanderers exploring uncharted lands. All are touched by his unseen hand. The god's lessons, embedded in experience, intuition, and reflection, are carried forward by each traveler, multiplied and passed on to countless others, creating an enduring chain of wisdom, prudence, and cleverness. Hermes also embodies the delicate balance between guidance and independence. He does not force travelers to succeed, nor does he shield them entirely from mistakes. Instead, he teaches the subtle art of learning through experience. Mistakes become lessons, obstacles become teachers, and insight is revealed to those attentive enough to perceive it. By allowing mortals to navigate challenges, Hermes instills resilience, resourcefulness, and moral understanding. Each journey becomes a mirror, reflecting the traveler's character, choices, and capacity for growth. Even those who remain unaware of Hermes' presence are influenced by his legacy. The winds, rivers, forests, and mountains, shaped in part by his guiding hand, teach the same lessons: to observe, to adapt, to act with prudence, to respect the natural and divine order. Travelers who heed these subtle signs, even unknowingly, benefit from his wisdom, experiencing safety, insight, and growth in ways that transform their lives. Hermes' guidance is a gift not always visible but always present, a quiet companion on every path, ensuring that courage, cleverness, and moral awareness endure. As mortals rest under the open sky, their journeys pause for the night. Hermes watches silently, ever vigilant. His winged sandals leave no trace. His caduceus gleams with the promise of insight, and his presence flows through the world like a hidden current. The lessons he imparts: wisdom through observation, courage tempered by prudence, and cleverness balanced with integrity, echo across time, influencing travelers, communities, and the generations yet to come. The God story reminds us that the world is alive with guidance, learning, and subtle magic. Every journey carries meaning. Every path, whether treacherous or serene, holds lessons waiting to be discovered. The invisible threads of Hermes' influence connect mortal experience to divine wisdom, showing that no traveler is truly alone. Whether crossing mountains, rivers, forests, or deserts, the attentive traveler may feel a whisper of wind, a subtle alignment of circumstance, or an unexpected insight, and know, in that quiet moment, that Hermes walks beside them. Thus, the tale of Hermes, the guide of travelers, concludes not with an ending, but with a continuing presence. His story is eternal, lived in every journey, reflected in every lesson learned, and carried forward by every traveler who moves with courage, cleverness, and attentiveness. In the hush of the night, when the world is still, one can imagine his wings brushing the stars, his footsteps tracing unseen paths, and his caduceus shining faintly in the moonlight, a symbol of guidance, wisdom, and enduring care. For those who close their eyes under the starlit sky, ready to dream of distant lands and adventures yet to come, Hermes' essence lingers. He teaches that every journey matters, every lesson endures, and every traveler, guided by wit, courage, and observation, carries within them the eternal spirit of the messenger of Olympus. The paths of the world are countless, and the journeys of mortals infinite. Yet through them all flows the quiet, invisible, enduring presence of Hermes, the guide, protector, and teacher. And so, as night deepens and the world slumbers, the god watches, swift and unseen, ensuring that every traveler may walk wisely, bravely, and with the cleverness of the divine flowing through their steps. Thus ends this tale, but the journey of guidance, wisdom, and courage continues forever, an eternal gift from Hermes to all who dare to explore the paths of life.